All right, fair enough? So who am I and why on earth should you listen to Karla Dennis? Outside of the fact that I think I always have something to say, I am a tax strategist. I am a licensed enrolled agent. I've been in this industry for a very long time. Believe it or not, I started in this industry with my father when I was 18. He used to do taxes for H&R Block, and I would bug him to death. And I sit next to him, and that's really kind of where I got my beginning. I went to school. I received my master's in taxation. I have an undergrad degree in accounting, and then I spent quite a bit of time in a tax law firm doing tax planning for higher-end individuals. During that time period, I really wasn't a tax girl at that point. I really just kind of wanted to be a controller in a corner and be quiet. But it was something about people not paying taxes that had a lot of money that intrigued me. So it was my goal to figure out what they knew. Like, if you put something in front of me, I'm going to figure it out. So I learned quite a bit. And then when I decided to go out and start my family, I have 4 wonderful sons. I decided that I couldn't do 90 hours a week, and I do mean 90 hours a week in this industry because there's always time constraints. I decided to start my own practice, and I didn't start my own practice out with the theory that it would grow to where it was today. I started that practice literally wanting to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also wanted to be in the tax industry. So I used to bounce my oldest son on my knee and do clients at the same time. So now my sons work with me in my practice, at least my 2 oldest ones do. My 3rd is in college, and my 4th is in his last year of high school. Thank you, Jesus, right? I'm so happy. So I own Karla Dennis Associates. We are a full-service accounting, consultancy, and tax practice firm. And the reason why I say consultancy, because we consult with clients on a lot of things as it pertains to their businesses, taxes, their real estate, their deals. We are not real estate agents. We're not looking to ever take any type of commission. Our fiduciary is to you, the client. But what our goal is to make certain that the numbers look right, that from a tax perspective is correct, and that we have a database of clients who've dealt with thousands of realtors and property managers. And when I tell you I keep a list of the ugly people, I keep a list of the ugly people that you don't want to do business with. So not that I'm going to publish that list, but I will tell you that if you come to me and that person's on the list, I will certainly let you know that my client had a bad time with this individual. Just as an FYI. The seat that we sit in a seat of ultimate knowledge because we do see the real numbers that come across the tax return, right? Are the numbers you guys choose to put on the tax return. Why don't we use that? So we sort of know what's really happening. So our event today is how to retire with rental income without overpaying Uncle Sam. Before we jump into that event, I want to know how many of you in the room own real estate? Okay, so the majority of you own real estate. All right, very good. And are you guys, how many of you own 1 property? How many of you guys own 5 properties or more? Okay, good. So you guys are pretty experienced. And how many of you guys want to own 10 properties?
No.
Right? Yeah, so I think that the property game is really, I call it a game because it's like Monopoly to me. We started playing that game when we were younger. The property game is really interesting. There's so many different philosophies out there on how you make money in real estate. And you can make money in real estate in a lot of different ways, but I am just going to go back to what I know for sure. And to me, you're going to make money in real estate, what I like to call long-term hold, right? We can buy and flip. We can try to time the market. We can try to do a lot of things to make real estate. But when I tell you that I sit with a lot of wealthy clients that started with 1 piece of real estate, I started with my first piece of real estate in the city of Compton when I first came out of college. Took a student loan out my last year of college, put that money to the side, and brought my first piece of real estate. and then parlayed myself from there. So it's always been like a long-term hold for me. I know people have bought properties, flipped out of properties. Certainly I've bought, sold, and legged up to another property, right? But it's always been about the long term. That may not be everybody's philosophy, but I just think that that's the ultimate way that you're going to make money in real estate. What I see in my practice, and really how do people build wealth, and how do they really minimize their taxes? What does that ultimately look like for people? Does anybody know? How are people building wealth? Depreciation. What else? Anybody? Inflation. Equity. Appreciation, right? Anybody else? How do we build wealth? So we build wealth just by appreciation? What's appreciating? The property, right? The property has to appreciate, the assets, right? Property is an asset. So we're going to build wealth by having assets that appreciate. That's the way that we're going to build wealth, by having properties that appreciate. People that build wealth strategically invest in assets, properties, businesses, assets that have tax advantages. Real estate, oil and gas, businesses, they invest in assets that have tax advantages, assets that have a tendency to appreciate, right? Now, in real estate, we have appreciation and we also have depreciation in real estate, but depreciation from a different type of term, a different definition of depreciation. When we invest in high-end cars and things like that, are we investing in assets that appreciate? No, right? Not usually, unless you get some of them really high-end cars, right? That appreciate, which I only know the name of those because Karla drives a little conservative Toyota Camry. So we invest in assets that appreciate. That's the way that people build wealth. So when you think about people that are wealthy, and when you think about those people, who are those people? Who are some names of people who you think are wealthy? Donald Trump. What is he on? A lot of real estate. Who said Warren Buffett? What is he on? Everything we don't own, right? He owns stocks, right? He owns businesses, things that appreciate. Do you have to be invested in one class of an asset? Just real estate, just business, just stock? No, right? You want to be invested in a little bit of everything. What was that? Diversification, right? Diversification. Why do you want to be diversified?
One goes down, the other one is still there.
One goes down, one goes up. It's almost finding the bookends, the teeter-totter, right? So I like to say you need to find the teeter-totter so that no matter what, you're not in a bad position. You're not in a bad position. For everybody that had their money in real estate, was it 2007? What was the year that the market just tanked? 2006. We all went to bed as bazillionaires and woke up broke, right? In 2006. So those people who had all their money in real estate, when real estate took a dip, they were in trouble if they were looking to liquidate at that moment. If those people had all of their money invested in stock and they were getting ready to retire, what happened when the market dropped? It was a meltdown. 401ks went to 101ks, right? So it's about having a little bit of everything. It's not about just being in one thing. And I think that sometimes we forget about that. So people that are really trying to grow wealth, trying to reduce their taxes, they strategically invest in assets that have tax advantages. Now, I see two different types of investors in my office. When clients come to me, they're either one way or the other. And which way do you think that is? What was that?
Real estate.
Real estate, type of investors. I have real estate investors. What else?
Or some other aggressive.
Business investors. I have business investors, but I have investors that are ultra impulsive. You know what an impulsive investor is? Just somebody going out buying stuff.
Day trader.
A day trader, just doing something, not thinking, just doing things. Hey, Karla, I'm doing this. By the time I get off the phone with them, they're emailing me doing something else. I'm like, hold on a second, you're doing everything. And when I ask them why they're doing that, they typically can't answer the question. Why are you investing in that? Why are you doing that? Oh, well, my friend invested in that and my friend made so much money. Okay, but does that mean you should do it? Do you want to be an impulsive investor? No, you don't. What type of investor do you want to be? Smart, because impulsive investors are over leveraged. They don't know why they purchased something, right? They don't understand the ramifications, and they're making emotional buys. Emotional buys are not good decisions. Emotional anything is not really good, right? Is there any time that you should make a decision based off of emotion? Love? Well, You don't even make the decision of love off of emotion at all. Let me tell you. You get out a piece of paper and you go pros, cons. If the pros outweigh the cons, I'm so in love with you. Right? That's probably the only decision is love. Love is definitely an emotional decision, right? I think marriage don't make off emotion. All right. So impulsive investors are just doing things. They're just purchasing stuff. They're not really thinking straight. What type of investor do you think Warren Buffett is? Strategic. He's a strategic investor. He is going to do his homework. It's going to be thoughtful in his investing. He's going to slow down to get a team to analyze to make sure things are done right. When I hear a client tell me, Karla, this deal, if I don't hurry up and pull the trigger on this deal is going away. Well, then let the deal go away. I'm never going to do a deal, regardless of what that deal is, where I can't take the time to stop, think, and analyze the situation. Now, I don't want to go to paralysis by analysis, just overanalyze something, but I think you need to take time to do your due diligence. Take the time to do your due diligence. And you really need to think, what is your strategy? What are you trying to accomplish? And think long term. Because short-term thinking may get you something today that may not get you where you want to go down the road. Does that make sense to you guys? Short-term decision making. Oh, if I flip this property right now, I can make a quick $50,000, $60,000 if I do this flip. Okay, but did you vet that flip out? Do you know who you're doing the flip with? Have you thought it all the way through? Oh, these are really good friends of mine. We've known each other for a long time. I'm going to put my money in and we're just going to flip this deal. And that very client who told me that is in a lawsuit with that real good friend of his. Because the person they flipped and sold to is suing them. You see what I mean? Like, take the time and get it sorted out, right? Take the time and get things sorted out. And again, I tell you guys, I'm not a realtor, I'm not an attorney, but common sense goes a long ways. Common sense goes a long way. Stay in the driver's seat of what it is that you guys are trying to do. And there are some seats up front over here to the right. Take the time to figure out what it is that you guys are trying to do. Have a strategy, have a plan. Have a strategy and have a plan. Like, why are you investing in real estate? Are you investing in real estate for retirement? Are you investing in real estate to sell it all one day and liquidate it and live off the income or the monies you get from it? Are you investing to leave a legacy? Are you investing because you just want to win the game of Monopoly? Why are you investing in real estate? And then I would take it even further, and I'm sure Kathy will talk about this when she comes up to speak, and where are you investing in your real estate? I think us LA people are so emotionally tied to LA. We are just definitely emotionally tied to Los Angeles. And I don't know why that is, because whenever I travel out of state, I ask myself all the time, why do I even live in Los Angeles? Every single time when I travel different places. I went to Alabama recently, Alabama out of all places, right? Out of all places. And they had these big, beautiful 7,000 square feet homes on acres of properties for about a third of what I'm paying here. I could go there and have a butler and 2 maids. So you have to ask yourself, why are we still here in California, right? When my youngest son gets out of high school, I'm taking me and all 4 of my sons and we moving, right, boys? They're like, you're right, but that's not happening, Mom. But just ask yourself that question. You don't necessarily need to be where your money is. You're not where your stock is invested, right? Are you where your stock is invested? Why do you got to be where your real estate is invested? Food for thought. There's no emotional decisions. The decisions are based on numbers, and the money's green no matter where it is, right? So something to think about. So the other thing that I want to tell you is always making sure that as a strategic investor, you have a tax strategy, a strategy, and a wealth building strategy. You need to have both. Because you can come to me and say, Karla, I made $1 million this year, and I can come back and say you have a $500,000 tax bill. I'm not impressed if you make that type of money and the tax bill is still high, right? I would rather make $500,000 and my tax bill be only $75,000, right? That's a better return on my money, effort, and energy, in my opinion. So you gotta have both. I am going to walk you through what tax strategy looks like, and I am sure Kathy will walk you through what a strategy needs to look like when you guys are considering real estate, right? But at the end of the day, you guys have to really take the time to stop and analyze what you're trying to do and just really, shut your brains down a little bit, block out the world, turn off the Instagram, the iPhone, all the apps, and just think. If life was great, what would that look like for you, right? So let's talk about what does it look like to put together a tax strategy. And this is the way I did strategy when I worked at the tax law firm. Anytime we're going to work with a client, the very first thing that we're going to do is get some history on a situation. So if we're going to be looking at tax strategy, we want to look at his history. Why do we want to look at history? Anybody? Motive? If you were buying real estate, why would you want to look at the history, the historical data?
Historical data. Like every 10 years or so.
Because those that know the history do repeat.
Those who know the history do not repeat it. You need to understand the history. What were we going to say, Rob?
To know if the property is in an area that appreciates.
Yeah, know what type of area you're dealing with. Look at the historical data on anything, right? History is a good indicator of what's coming. Past behavior is a good indicator of what's coming. It doesn't necessarily be definitive, but at least it kind of tells us you're going in with full knowledge. So in doing a tax strategy, I am reviewing past year's tax returns, past year's tax history. I want to know what transpired prior to Karla. What transpired? It's important for me to understand. And some of you will say, well, you know what, Karla, this year is going to be completely different. Okay, I get it. But I still want to know what happened in the past, right? I still want to understand that. That is so key. You definitely want to understand that. I think anybody that's looking to get into real estate, continue up to real estate, whether it's real estate stocks or anything like that, it would behoove you to do a little study of past things that have transpired on anything that you're going to do. Look at the history of it. So that's the first thing we're going to do. What's the next thing you think we're going to do? Once you look at the past, what would you want to do after that? Look at the present. Where are we right now? Where are we right now in the tax climate, right? We just had a tax law that just passed. So I'm looking at regulatory things right now. Where are we right now with tax laws? Where are you right now with your tax bill? Where are you sitting with your 2019 tax liability? We are 8.5 months into the year. What is that 2019 number looking like? And don't say, well, Karla, I don't know because the year hasn't closed. Well, we have 8.5 months of data, right? We can analyze and kind of figure out what needs to happen moving forward or where you're going to go. But we need to know that. If you're going to invest in anything, where's the stock market right now? Where's the real estate market right now? You want to know that. Where is it? Is it at a peak based on a trend? You just got to get that level of knowledge under your belt, and you got to start thinking about that. Anytime I'm dealing with anything, I always got to get a benchmark. How do I know where to go if I do not have a benchmark of where I am right now? When you guys leave here to try to drive home, you got to at least put in your GPS where you're going, right? Got to know where you are. GPS said, where are you? So you got to know where you are. So anytime we're going to look at strategy, we got to know where you are right now. We got to get that sorted out to figure out what needs to happen. And once we figure that out, what's the next thing we need to do? What do you want to do for the future, right? What's your goals? Has anybody written down their tax goals? Nobody in this room has written down their tax goals?
I did.
What's your tax goal?
As low as possible, 0.
And what is your name?
Fatima.
Fatima said as low as possible and 0. Honestly, at least you're willing to admit it. Is the rest of your guys' tax goals to overpay the government and leave Uncle Sam a tip? So then you have a goal, whether you want to voice that goal or not, right? So 0 would be a perfect goal. Amazon paid 0. Do you guys think you should pay 0? Regardless of the reason why you want to pay 0, and I'm not standing here saying you're going to pay 0 in tax, so let's be clear with that. I'm not saying that. But what I am going to tell you is that you should pay the legal limit based on the law. The legal minimum based on the law. That's what I'm going to tell you. And whatever that law is, you should pay the legal minimum based on the law. And then at least you should know what that is. And then if you decide that you want to pay more than the minimum, if it's just in your heart that when you're doing your tax return, you want to write a check for an extra $2,500 or $25,000, so be it. But know you're doing it. Know that you're doing it, right? I think your tax bill should be as low as the law permits. That's where your tax bill should be, as low as the law permits. What's the law that we go by for our taxes? What is the law that we go by for our taxes? The tax code, the Internal Revenue Code. We don't go by H&R Block. We don't go by tax publications. We don't go by what auditors tell us. We go by the tax code. There are laws that tell you how low your taxes should be, right? The key is the majority of you probably don't know what those laws are, but there are laws that reduce your taxes. It's called the tax code. Is the tax code only for a certain group of people?
For everybody.
It's for who?
For all of us.
How many of you guys think the tax code is for everybody?
Yeah, you can use it.
Your guys' hands are going up weak. Y'all got like half hands. How many of you guys think the tax code is for everybody?
Yes.
So that's the majority of people, right? You guys think the tax code is for everybody. I agree. But what I will tell you, those of you who own real estate, i.e., which is a business, the tax code is going to put you in a better position than someone that is a basic W-2 employee. That's just the way that it goes. They recently pulled the majority of the deductions for the W-2 employees. So if you are a W-2 employee and you have a business, you're sitting in a sweet spot. If you have just a business, you're really in a sweet spot. And if you are a basic W-2 employee, well, talk to me, right? That's a whole nother level because there's only so many deductions you're going to get when you're a basic W-2 employee. When you're on the other side of the spectrum, it's unlimited. You guys follow me? So bottom line is you need to understand what your vision is, what you are trying to accomplish as individuals. And the reason why I say that is because when people come to me and they say, Karla, I want to lower my taxes, I want to use my money for myself and not give it to the government, I want to pay zero tax liability for whatever reason, I'm going to ask you what your goals are. And the reason why I need to know the answer to that question is because the way that we are able to acquire loans to get property, right, and certain things depending on where you are in your stage of investing, you may need to have your income at a certain level to qualify, correct?
Yes.
Right? So if I'm going to lower tax, and in some cases I can lower tax by using different strategies that are not going to affect income. In other cases, I'm going to drop income, and we're going to drop it legally with tax deductions. But I don't want to drop income and reduce your tax bill down so low that 6-7 months from now, when you're trying to purchase that piece of property, you can't get that piece of property. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I'm sure some of you have been in that boat because clients have come to me and said, I can't qualify for a piece of property. So strategically, we have to know where you're trying to go before we reduce your tax bill. And how we reduce your tax bill, it becomes very important based on your goals. Make sense? Very important to understand that. A lot of you will come to me and ask me about being incorporated, S Corp, C Corp. Karla, should I be one or the other? And my answer is always going to be, I do not know until I figure out what you're trying to accomplish. I may advise the same people with the exact same dollars, exact same expenses to be a completely different entity type based on where they're trying to go. All right, so that's really important for you to understand. Strategy, thoughtfulness, strategic, understanding your vision, write it down. It could change a little bit, right? But when you set a goal and you write that goal, did that just move on its own?
Yes.
When you set a goal and you write a goal down, typically you're going to get to where you need to go. So we want to make sure that we do that. The other thing is, once we assess your current situation and understand your vision, and then it's at that point that we can implement the right strategies for you. The right strategies. Take the time to get it done. The right things. You know, I had a client call me yesterday in a hurry. He needed to make a quick decision. And I said, well, if you need to make a quick decision, I don't have a quick answer for you. Because I'm not going to ill-advise you when I haven't had the opportunity to vet out the decision you want me to make and put my name on. I don't make decisions like that. And I think that if you're trying to build wealth, if you're trying to be a strategic investor, if you're trying to stay in this game for the long haul, and you want it to be a steady thing for you and solid, you got to make solid decisions. You can't make short-sighted decisions. Make sense? Right? There's no quicksand, right? We don't want quicksand. Oh, hurry up and do it. My philosophy is hurry up and wait. How about that? I'm not in a hurry to do anything anymore at this point. So we can implement the right strategies at that point. And then once we do that, it's all about continuing the conversation. It's all about being in conversation with your team. It's all about making sure you have somebody that you can talk to. You can have somebody you can talk to and you can vet things out against, right? A sounding board. Do you guys talk to yourselves about things?
Yes.
Right? At least she's willing to admit it. Who said yes over here, right? How many of you talk to yourselves about things? Right? Right? We talk to ourselves about things. We start thinking, I wonder if I should do that. And then we answer over here, right? But typically we reason ourselves to wherever direction we want to go. It's always good to have people you can mastermind with, throw ideas with, and for people to be able to play devil's advocate with you. And honestly go, okay, but what if this were to happen? Or what about this scenario, right? Those are always good situations to be in. So when I work with clients, I like to work with clients continuously. If we said we were going to do X in April, where are we in July? Where are we in September? Where are we in December? And certainly we need to get together right before that turkey goes in the oven so we can know where you are, because your year is closing on December 31st for the most part. Does that make sense to you guys? Yes. So that's definitely very important that we do. A couple other things that I certainly want to mention to you is, number one, do I think that we're going to have another tax law change? Well, it's going to depend on who gets in office, whether I think we'll have another tax law change. If the president changes, I'm sure we will have another tax law change. That's just sort of the way it goes, right? So something to look forward to. The tax laws right now are really great. We're sitting in a great position from a law perspective when you own a business right now. That I will definitely tell you. And we need to take advantage of every single law. Again, my favorite code section, does anybody know?
162 and 170.
Who's?
162.
Wait, what did we say?
162.
You said 162?
157?
157?
179.
179? 162A. Give this girl a hand. She said 162A. That's my favorite code section, right? I like 179 too, but 162 gives you 179. Just as an FYI, right? So 162 allows us to take our deductions. All right, guys, I can talk forever, but you guys didn't come here to hear me talk about everything. Really quickly, if you're in real estate, some things for you to know. I still am blown away by people who don't know about 1031 exchanges. I still have people selling property outright and buying another piece of property outright and not using that little code section 1031. I still see that quite a bit. So FYI, if you don't know what that is, see me. You should absolutely be taking advantage of depreciation. Some of you do not take depreciation on your tax return because if you think you don't take it, you think you don't have to recapture it. But you do. Depreciation is what we call allowed or allowable. You're going to get that hit whether you took it or not. Definitely need to be looking at cost segregation studies. It is the little golden nugget in the tax code. You certainly want to look at that. CNN, CNBC, Fox News, she's been all over the place. It's really an honor for her to be in the room with us today and for me to introduce Kathy Fettke to come up and talk to you guys about real estate. Are you guys ready for that? Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You are so welcome. I'm going to let you take that. All right, I think you are.
Okay.
Try it.
Either way, I can talk loud. Can you hear me? Is this working? No.
Can we get Mike too, please?
All right. Well, I couldn't agree more with everything Karla just said. Oh my gosh, I felt like she was speaking for me. The mistakes I've made in life have been from lack of due diligence, for sure, including my first marriage. But second one I got right. Thank you. He's not here, so I think I can say that. All right, building long-term wealth. So imagine for a moment that you had one of these homes that you rented out and the tenants paid off the loan for you through their rent, and after time you own that property free and clear and maybe put 20% down, but the tenants paid the rest off for you. You're on. Karla, your mic's on. There we go. All right. So, would that make your life a little different if you had $1,000 a month passive income coming in? It would be nice, wouldn't it? Imagine if you had two, and you had $2,000 passive income coming in. What if you had 10? Is that possible?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Anybody here have rentals? Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this will be very basic for a lot of you, but hopefully something new too. So that's really the dream, right? Is to have passive income that just mailbox money basically. But what are the obstacles? Why don't more people have that? I think number one, there's this belief that you got to have a lot of money, right? That's what kept me from starting earlier. Money. How do you get the money? The time. Sometimes we're just too busy, even if you have the money. Maybe if you have the money, it's because you work really hard and you don't have the time to do what it takes to do the research and understand the investment and fill out all the loan docs and meet with the property management and all of that, or fix toilets. Oh my goodness. Fear. And then there's just fear. I mean, anybody afraid of owning a rent, having tenants, dealing with that? There's a lot of fear in asset protection. Am I going to do this right? So getting over these things is what is going to get you there. Now, in 2003, the way I got started was I got past all of those obstacles because sometimes when something terrible happens in your life, you move faster. You get things done. So if you can look back at those challenging times, those are often the times that define us. And if you're in one of those challenging times, then congratulations, you're on a big learning curve and you can get things done because you have to. And that was the case for me. In 2003, I was a stay-at-home mom. I was living my dream. My husband had written a book called Extreme Success. He was traveling the world as a business coach, doing interviews, and we bought our first house. Things were really good until he came home one day after a book tour and had gone to the doctor, found out a freckle was melanoma. The doctor did more tests. Turned out he thought it had spread to his liver, and it looked like there were 3 growths in his liver. This is the second husband. And the doctor kind of looked at him and said, if this is true, if it's spread to your liver and metastasized, you probably have about 3 to 6 months. So here was a time when we had it all. We had 2 kids, the house, we were saving 10%, investing 10%, doing things right, and then bam. So if you have lived, you've probably had surprises like this. They come in different shapes and forms, and that's why we're supposed to have that 10% emergency savings. Well, when you have cancer, you can blow through that pretty quickly if you don't have another way, if you're doing things the traditional way. So we did. So the good news is, and I often forget to say this part, Rich is fine today. So that is the good news. The doctor was wrong. They took care of it. He has a lot of scars from cutting out the melanoma, but what had spread was they were able to take care of it. So he's healthy today and he gets his regular skin checks. This is what happens when you're a bodybuilder and you burn, in the 80s he would go in and try to look really good on stage. So he did those tanning beds. Anyway, don't do those. But in 2004, I thought, okay, we didn't know if he was going to be okay. So I needed to figure out how he could get better and how we could have passive income. So how do we do that? Well, I lived in San Francisco. I had a radio show. My background was in the news. I had worked at CNN and KTVU, which is Fox News, and ABC. And when I was a stay-at-home mom, I still kept this radio show, but I didn't make much money on it. But I thought, I'm going to use this platform to find out how other people can be stay-at-home moms, how I can not have to leave my kids all day, but there must be a way. So I just started interviewing people. And I interviewed wealthy people who'd figure out their secrets over and over again. It was shocking how many people were willing to come on the show and tell me their success secrets. That show is still there today. It's called The Real Wealth Show, and I still interview successful people, and they still share their secrets. But at the time, it really came down to 2 things, which is why you're here. The people who I interview have created success through owning a business or owning real estate. And because they're able, if you trade time for money, you don't have enough hours unless you make a lot of money per hour. But even if you have some downtime and you can't work, then you can't make those big dollars. So, having an asset that makes money for you, whether you're working or not, is what other people were able to do. If they had a business, they were able to make it a self-managed business that they weren't deeply involved in. They just could, manage it. It runs itself. Or they had real estate. And really, it comes down to one thing, which is business. Because if you treat your real estate like a business, then that's how you should be doing it, so you're not the one running out, trading time for dollars, fixing toilets and so forth. It's run like a business, you have other people doing that for you, then that's how you can truly build long-term passive income. So we tried it. We took this house. This was a house that we had bought, and let me tell you, when things are good, it's wonderful. When things are hard, it's a noose. And this is what, like, oh my gosh, Rich isn't working right now. How are we going to hold this thing? But we had bought big enough. We kind of like went overboard. So we decided to try to rent it out. We turned it into a triplex, rented these 2 units, and from that found out that we had enough rental income that it pretty much covered the whole mortgage. We could live on the top floor for free. And nobody told us how to do it. We didn't know what we were doing. We just put ads on Craigslist. We got some weird people. That was before Airbnb, where you could actually vet people. We didn't know how to do background checks, but it worked out well enough that that we were able to create this income. And in that process, this was 2004. What happened in 2004? Do you remember what happened in real estate in 2004? Prices, I think this was the year prices doubled in California. I mean, it was like a 40% increase. It was crazy. So instead of losing our house during this tough time, we just rented the units out, and that house went up a lot. It went up about $1 million in the time that we bought it, 97 to 2007. So holding on, being able to hold on to your property is the key. Like Karla said earlier, over leveraging is what we're seeing a lot of people over leveraging, getting big loans. And that's what got us into trouble last time. You don't want to invest in anybody else's multifamily or project that's just got 20% in it. That's not a big margin for error there. 20% down on a house is okay, but just know that it's over leveraging that takes people down in a down market. So be very, very careful about that. So it was right around 2005 that I was seeing, oh my gosh, we just made all this money in this house. This is amazing. We should buy more of these things. And it was, I was able to have Robert Kiyosaki on my show because, again, I had a San Francisco station, so it was a big station. He was willing to come on. Anybody read Rich Dad, Poor Dad? Good. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. Get your kids to read it. It's a really well-written book. Millions of people have read it, and it's changed their lives. So I was able to have him on. And I'm like, bragging about all this money we made in this triplex that we now had, and wow, we wanted to buy more. And he said, look, this is not sustainable. These are loans that, we know the story now. People able to get loans that they couldn't afford to pay back. He said this is going to obviously not work out in the end if people can't pay their mortgages. And it was just a really good point to have someone with great, many, many years of experience be able to look at what everybody else was so excited about, which is anyone could get a loan, anyone could buy real estate. But what he was doing was dealing with common sense. And I heard Karla say that earlier, common sense. Even the top people on Wall Street weren't using common sense. And even the Federal Reserve that's supposed to monitor our economy, no common sense. They weren't even predicting a recession in 2008 when we were already in one. They were saying, Ben Bernanke was famously quoted as saying, yeah, we're not going to have a recession this year. And then it was a few months later that Lehman Brothers collapsed. So common sense. And that's what Robert was able to bring to me and say, this isn't going to work out well. Prices have gone way beyond the fundamentals in California. But there's other places where the fundamentals were there. And so he explained that he was selling California when everybody else was diving in. That's usually what happens. 80% dive in, the 20%, the smart money leaves. And they basically pass the baton, they pass the hot potato to those who haven't done the research or don't have the experience. So he was saying, no. I know everybody's buying at this time, but he was selling, and instead he was buying in Texas because of the fundamentals. So what kind of fundamentals do you think he was talking about? What would be the most important thing to look at when deciding, is it a good time to buy or sell?
Over leverage. Cash flow.
Cash flow, definitely cash flow, over leverage, people going in 105%. You could buy a home and get money back then. It was crazy. What else?
Economy.
The economy, yeah. Well, that's a tricky one because a lot of times the economy's hot and everything looks good and then it collapses in a day. So that, that's what happened back then. Everybody was like, wow, this is a great economy. There's no chance of failing. And that's where they get tricked. So the fundamentals really with housing, it's affordability. If the affordability is out of whack, then we're going to have a problem down the road. Back then, 10 years ago, the way they solved this problem was by making everything affordable so anyone could have a loan. I was a loan broker back then. I ended up getting into the business. And I'm telling you, I would have, every day I'd come into my office and there would be flyers on my desk saying, we'll lend up to $5 million, no income, no asset loan. You know what that means? That's a NINA loan. It means we're not checking if there's assets or income. We're not checking anything. They just need a social security number. Yeah, and in some cases they didn't check the credit. It was crazy. It was crazy. So that, when anyone could get a loan to buy anything, of course prices go up. And that's where we were. Now, why Kiyosaki was explaining, so then when you looked at the fundamentals, I had a woman come to me who made maybe $2,000 a month, and her mortgage payment in a normal world would have been $2,500. So how do you make $2,000 and pay $2,500 on a mortgage? But she was able to qualify because they only qualified her on a teaser rate, they literally qualified her on, 10% of that. So she could qualify knowing full well that would adjust to the full payment and she wouldn't be able to qualify. So those fundamentals didn't make sense. So Kiyosaki was saying, get out, sell, everybody's buying, you sell, get to where it makes sense and where nobody's buying. And at the time, that was Texas. So the fundamentals there were that you had the strongest job growth in the country, the strongest population growth in the country, and the most affordable housing, because the housing hadn't caught up to the salary increases. So exactly the opposite of California, where you could almost, an income might be $100,000, but you could buy a house for $100,000. So to give you a kind of round idea of or just a quick view of what fundamental would be, when banks look at whether you qualify or not, they generally want to see that the mortgage payment is a third or a fourth of your income. So the house should not be more than 2 to 3 times your income. So if there's an average income of $100,000 in an area, the home prices should be around $300,000 or $400,000. Is that the case here? Not at all. Not at all, but that was the case in Texas. You could have a $100,000 income and the houses were nice house, $150,000. So way uber affordable. And that's not that exciting, except that we saw these trends that Texas was becoming a very job-friendly place, and that more and more jobs would be going there and more people, but housing couldn't keep up. So even though when you looked at the map, and I'll show you one later, it looked boring. It was flat. People were like, why would you buy in Texas? There's nothing happening there. Well, there was a lot happening. You just couldn't see it yet. It wasn't on the chart yet. It was forecast. So that's kind of what we have to get good at, is like, where's the puck going? Where are things going? Not so much what's happened, because you'll get caught there. So anyway, we did it. We took the equity out of that house I showed you, and we bought houses in Texas in 2005. What do you think that house cost?
$200,000 at the time.
It probably was worth that. We got, because there was nobody buying, because everybody was buying in the hot markets like California and Arizona and Florida, you just didn't have a lot of buyers. So I think they had listed it for around that. But we got it for $140,000. And we bought a bunch of them. we literally were like, this is crazy. Now this makes sense. How do you even build that for $140,000? Can you imagine? We can't even remodel kitchens for that around here, But you could buy a whole house. And then what do you think it rented for? $1,500. So about that 1% rule. Yeah, sure, they have high taxes, but you know what? If you're paying 3% tax on a $150,000 house, it's still not that much. Not as much as 1% on $1 million house in California, right? So people complain that taxes were high, but when you looked at the fundamentals, the numbers still really worked. It made sense. So we did it. So then I went and talked to people on my radio show, and I was like, oh my gosh, we just took money out of our house here, and we bought over there, and kind of explained why, and suddenly our phones were ringing off the hook of people saying, oh, we want to do that. Like, who what property manager did you use? What real estate agent did you use? We thought, okay, there's really a need for people to understand the fundamentals and understand what it takes to buy somewhere that's not in your own neighborhood, if your own neighborhood doesn't make sense. And so my husband and I were like, oh, we just want something real. We just want something that helps people build wealth from people who really know how to do it, and they're not just trying to sell boot camps for $5,000, $10,000. We want this, we want to share our network of people we've used and trusted. So we're like, Real Wealth Network. We're going to call it that. And that is what we created. So as I was talking about it, in 2006, again, this is when the masses were buying. They were buying at the peak. Why would they buy at the peak? Because everyone else was. That's, like I said, that's when prices have gone up like this for a while, people go, ooh, I want that. They don't realize that already happened. It's already happened. It's not going to, it doesn't mean it's going to keep going. It could, but how would you know that you've reached a peak? How do you know when it's hit the top? And again, it comes back to that affordability. So this woman came to me and heard me, what we were doing, and she said, I bought these 3 homes. They weren't this home. I used this as an exaggeration, but they were pretty messed up homes in Stockton. Not a good part of town, a lot of crime, a lot of turnover, a lot of nickel and dime, a lot of repairs needed because they were older homes. She had bought these homes thinking, I'm going to retire, I'm going to do the dream, own real estate, have it pay itself off, and then I'll be able to retire on that income. What she found is it was the opposite. She was feeding these properties. Has anybody done that? Where it's costing you to own it? Yeah, me too. It's not fun. So she's feeding these properties. It's costing her. She hated her job. She wanted to retire. The dream was not happening. So I said, well, what if you sold them? It's 2006. This is, I think, the peak. Sell them and exchange tax deferred. Karla could talk to you about that. Take all the money you made and not pay tax on it yet, put it off till the later through a 1031 exchange. Take all that money, and how about you buy some of those pretty little homes I bought, in the same neighborhood. We've done the research, we've got the property management in place. So she did it. She sold her 3 Stockton properties, 2006. She sold it for $420,000 each. So, for most people, they're like, why would anyone pay $400,000 for a house like that? But you know what? That's kind of how it is around here, right? I mean, you're not going to find much cheaper than that. So if you want an affordable house in California, it's probably not going to be in the nicest neighborhood, and it's probably going to be old, and it's probably going to require all these repairs, and there might be high crime. So $420,000 for a house like that, kind of normal in California, especially at this time in the cycle. So she sold them. She had no problem finding a buyer. They rented for $1,200 each. But with all the repairs that were needed, she was making $0. Somebody bought them. So what do you think that person buying them was thinking? I don't know. They just didn't know, right? They're like, I don't know, you buy real estate and you make money, right? A lot of people just think that. I'm going to just buy in California. California always goes up. Do you hear that? What else would, $1,200 a month rent, that's pretty good. It's better than, I don't know, putting it in the stock market and getting no money, right? So in terms of cash flow, so for whatever the reason, and I hear this a lot too, well, if I pay cash, it's cash flowing. I hear that all the time, really, like, okay, just put $1 million in, I'm getting $3,600 a month, that's cash flow. That's better than you're getting maybe somewhere else. So someone bought it. Well, she got her money out. Like I said, $1.2 million. She bought 9 of those beautiful little Texas houses where they also rented for $1,200. So now she went from 3 houses that were getting $1,200 to 9. So she tripled her cash flow. And she got new homes in nice areas near jobs. So they stayed rented. They didn't have a bunch of repairs. And she came to me and she did that thing everybody wants to do. And she's like, I did it. I put the note in front of my boss and I said, I'm done. That day, she's like, I retired. And how cool is that? From one simple move, one simple repositioning of assets, she was able to live her dream. Now that was a very exciting moment for me. Now, what was not as exciting was that about 18 months later, the person who paid that, who bought her properties, those properties went down to about $75,000 each. Stockton got hit the worst. So that person, here's two people in the same transaction, right? One wins, one loses. One did their research, one, just didn't. And I didn't know who bought these properties. I didn't actually sell them. An agent did. But I remember a man coming up to me, asking me for advice and me saying, don't do it. But he did it anyway. He didn't buy these, but he bought something similar. So it was just, when things have been good for a long time, people just think you can't fail. And that's how it was back then. It was just like, yeah, but you know what? It's just going to keep going up. It doesn't work that way. So I made this slide, and I'm not a graphic designer, so what it basically is showing is the 9 homes. And where we chose, so when I first went to Texas, I got off the plane, and I met with a real estate agent I found online. And she was like, oh, you're from California? Great, let me take you to this nice little neighborhood. Californians love this neighborhood. The homes are about $400,000. And I'm like, when you have California on your, it's like just dummy written on your forehead. They just know that that our values are different. We don't understand real estate here. Like it's a different game. So $420,000 is a deal for a nice home, for a mansion. You'd be like, yes. The problem is that's not a rental market. People aren't going to rent a mansion. People who can rent a mansion are going to buy a mansion. They're not going to rent it. A renter's not going to pay for, maybe today because they can Airbnb the room out, but back then, no, they're not going to pay all the, utilities for a big house like that. It's not a rental market. So anyway, I was like, okay, no. And then I thought, where am I going to find someone who's actually going to help me find a real rental? Like, a property manager. So instead, I just went and met with 5 property managers. And I was like, okay, where is the job demand? Where's the rental demand? Where are you getting the most phone calls from? Where people want to live? Where's the best schools? Where's the best deal? And they were like, I just got lucky. Well, I didn't get lucky. I met with 5 people and I found the one that made sense. And she said, Rockwell. She goes, I live in Rockwell. It's adorable. It's like the only place in Texas, there's Dallas, the only place in Texas where there was a hill and you could, instead of everything flat, it was like a hill overlooking a lake with trees. It was beautiful, beautiful little town. The problem with it, and then, these beautiful homes for $150,000, brand new, great schools, A+ rated schools, no crime. Why wouldn't everyone buy here? Because you had to drive around to get to work. And it would take about an hour commute. It's always the commute, right? It's a great little area, but a horrible commute, so people didn't do it. And, they just wouldn't go there. But what this person knew is that a freeway was coming in. Right here. That would make the commute to Dallas 20 minutes instead of an hour. That made sense to us. Oh man, this area's gonna pop. So sure enough, we bought, just helped a bunch of people buy all in this area over here. That up until then just hadn't been on the map, and those properties today, and again, at the time, really, really high-level investors would just look at me like, Texas? Now Texas is hot now, but back then, we're like, nothing happens in Texas. You'll never get appreciation. The taxes are high. There's so much land they can keep building. Why? Why would you go to Texas? Because they didn't see what was coming. They were only looking at the past. So what we learned is that invest in areas that have job and population growth. And these are really easy statistics to find. If there's job growth, there's going to be population growth. And you need people with jobs to rent your houses. That's the best deal. Get people with jobs to rent your house, or your apartment or whatever. And then look for the affordability factor. Like I said, you can't, especially today, because you actually have to qualify for a loan. When you hit the ceiling, you hit the ceiling. There's not any, stated income loans. While people say, they're back, they're not back. Maybe a tiny bit, but you have to qualify for a loan. So it's real easy to know you've hit the ceiling. And that's why we kind of saw real estate come to a slowdown in California, because we hit the ceiling when rates went up last year. It hit, it was like, nope, at some point people can't afford it. It can't go up forever. So understanding affordability, and then the key here was being the path of progress. So knowing that oh my gosh, there's freeways coming in. This little town had a bad reputation for having terrible traffic, but guess what? In a couple of years, that's going to be the hot place. And those houses are now 450,000. So this lady not only tripled her cash flow, she tripled her equity. She would have lost everything if she didn't make that move. But instead, she's got $3-4 million worth of property. Her rents have gone up. She never felt the recession. The biggest housing crisis is the Great Depression, and that woman didn't even feel it. She didn't even know it was happening because that area stayed hot even during the recession. And part of the research that we did is we found out that Texas was very strict about their loans. They didn't allow crazy loans. You could not refi more than 80%, whereas in California you could go over the value. You could go to 105 or 110% in the refi. You couldn't do that kind of thing there. They were very strict because they were the epicenter of the S&L crisis. They didn't want to do that again. So they redefined themselves. They're like, we're not going to do crazy leverage like these other places. So that's just, to give you an idea of how in this market where things seem a little, anybody concerned that we've maybe hit a peak or that there might be a down market coming? So just know that this is exactly 10 years ago, exactly what we did, and we were able to help people still buy real estate, but do it right and ride right through that recession. So the benefits of buy and hold, like we said, leverage is wonderful, just don't over leverage. So, where else can you put 20% down and have the bank put up 80%, but you get all the cash flow and all the equity growth, all the appreciation? Like you have this partner in the bank or the lender, but they're not taking any of the deal. If I partner with you, we're going to split it, right? We're going to split the cash flow, we're going to split the equity growth. Not with a bank, not with a bank loan. They just lend you the money. You pay, 5% interest to them, and you get everything else. All the tax deductions, all the appreciation, all the cash flow. It's incredible. So leverage is great. You just got to do it right and not over leverage. 30-year fixed rate loans are my favorite because you are fixed. If rents go up, your payment stays the same. You don't have a balloon note. You don't have to refi later when you have no idea what the rates are going to be. Just lock it in. Just lock it in. That's my thing. When Rich and I hit hard times, it's because we got the balloon notes or we got the adjustables and we had to refi and we had a construction. It was like, when the housing market fell apart, there was no loans. If you were in a balloon note, like we were in a construction loan, we didn't get the kind of construction loan that automatically goes into permanent. We had to refi. Well, in 2008, there was no bank that would do it. There was nothing. Even if we had perfect credit, we had money, they wouldn't give us the loan. So get a fixed rate loan and be careful in multifamily and commercial properties with leverage, because a lot of people are really excited about multifamily, as they should be. It's a great investment, but be cautious of the note, because if we hit a recession and if rents go down and the value then of the property goes down, the bank will require more money from you. Yep, it's scary. And if you don't have that money, the bank takes your property. It's the same with construction deals. If you invest in, if you're building, and let's say you're building a subdivision or something like that, or investing in something like that, and they have a loan that's dependent on you selling a certain number of homes, and we have a recession and it doesn't happen, the bank comes and takes it. They have to. They don't have the choice. It's a federal law, because banks have to foreclose when loans go bad. So there's good leverage, bad leverage. Get the good 30-year fixed stuff. Tax benefits. Oh my gosh, I got to a point when we did that. When Rich and I did this, we ended up getting 12 homes in like a matter of months in Texas, because it was like, oh, this is amazing. It was like addictive. Let's get more. And we had made all that money on that triplex thing, and so we bought a bunch. And then all of a sudden, we went to our CPA, and they're like, you don't have to pay taxes this year. And we're making 6 figures, and we pay no tax. It's crazy. Yes.
But you had to pay the Texas property taxes of 2.25%.
Yeah, but it's on a $150,000 property.
Yeah, that's nothing.
But doesn't it raises the market value of taxes? It's not based on purchase price.
It does go up, yes. So if I were owning those $400,000 properties, I would have sold them and got something cheaper. Yeah, I wouldn't hold, because the property taxes do go up, and I bet they don't cash flow now. I mean, they cash flow, but if you've got 300,000 in equity, go take it somewhere else. So I wouldn't keep it at that level, but hey, at that point, you just sell it and do another exchange.
Do they reassess the properties every year?
Yes.
In Texas?
Every year, yeah. So Texas isn't my first choice today. It was then.
it's not.
It's done. It's done. I mean, I'm just showing that back then the timing was incredible. Now it's too late.
Do you think we have to live there? I mean, the long distance investing, you have to fly there, or
Yeah.
I mean, what do you recommend as far as that?
Absolutely. What I'm trying to do is kind of just open up the minds of Californians that there is a world outside of here. It's so hard for us to understand that.
No, I mean, I know that.
Yeah.
It's just the logistics.
The logistics.
Of flying there, going there, really
Yeah.
knowing the area, or, whatever. I mean,
It's terrifying.
moving there,
Y-
or?
Well, no. So, again, when you invest in a stock, do you go and check out the business that you're investing in?
Stock is
They
managed.
call it stock breaking though.
Stock is managed.
It is, so you can have your property managed. And that is what has been developed in the last 10 years. When I started, it was terrible. I mean, these were mom and pop property managers that would rip you off left and right. That's a fact. And that's why, like, the idea was great, but the implementation was a lot harder.
Do you recommend we go there and get familiar with the area, see it, or a lot of people don't even go to see
A lot
it?
of people don't anymore because in the last 10 years, Wall Street has come in and they see the opportunity in housing, and they have helped develop systems that make it more automated. And then softwares have been developed, and it's a different world. And now there are large institutional property management firms that do a much better job. Not perfect at all, but better than 10 years ago for sure. So what I do recommend, and this is what has become my passion, is to find these areas, find the property managers with the best track records, and then go in as a group and say, okay, we're going to buy a bunch of properties. We want you to manage them, but you got to take care of all of us. So we're not kind of on our own individually. That's become my business. But if you were to go and just go to, yes, I recommend understanding the market, choosing a market, understanding it, going there. It's not that expensive. It's, go for a weekend. It's worth it compared to what the return you get here. To do what I did, walk the streets, talk to the property managers, find out where the jobs are, find out where the rental demand is. You can do it in a weekend. You really can. And then especially since we have gathered a lot of that data on our website to help you make that job easier, you could do it. And the website is realwealthnetwork.com. It's free. All that data is on there. We have property managers that we've, I don't want to say vetted, but based on their track record, they do a nice job. That's not to say that problems don't happen. It's real estate. Problems happen. You have to know that. You're going to, every now and then, get a bad tenant, or you're going to have to replace a roof. You want to have the reserves set aside for what you know is coming, which is probably repairs and probably vacancies, right? As long as you've got that in your numbers, you won't be taken off guard by it. I recommend usually $5,000 in the bank account for each property, just as reserves for those things that are certain to happen. But when you buy a property out of state, I recommend either new or renovated to a certain standard. We have a certain standard, again, on our website. It's listed. These are the things that you should look for or expect from the seller. The big ticket items. How old is the plumbing? How old is the roof? The stuff that's really going to cost you, the HVAC. And only buy if it has a certain life left based on the inspection report, or have the seller replace it.
Do you have a realtor represent you, or?
Yeah, so we've kind of created this network. So we have real estate agents nationwide, property managers nationwide that have a good track record. You still got to do your due diligence on them. You still got to always get your inspections, always get your appraisals. At the end of the day, people are working for their commission, right? So you still got to do your side, which is to make sure, that it checks out. You do your on. It's so easy. Like if someone says that a property is going to rent for a certain amount, how are you going to verify that? Tell me one way you verify that.
By checking other properties around.
Yeah, you can go on Zillow, you can go on Realtor.com. It's so easy today. It's so there wasn't 10 years ago. We were guessing. You can, if you're there, you knock on the door of the neighbor and say, "What's this neighborhood like?" Really? I mean, I do it all the time. I'll walk the neighborhood and be like, "Hey, do you like living here?" "Oh no, there's so much crime." "Oh, okay, thanks." Or yeah, this is the best neighborhood. We love this neighborhood. What's the house rent for around here? Find out. But you can do so much online. We have a lot of people who never go because so much can be done online. But I recommend going so that you feel comfortable, that you know the neighborhood. So again, the benefits of buying and holding versus flipping. Flipping, you can make money if you do it right. It's time intensive. It's also taxed higher. It's taxed as income. Whereas buy and hold is taxed differently. It's crazy the way the benefits we get from owning rental property. It's insane. Literally, that first year that we bought all those properties, we literally got our tax bill back and it was zero. And we're like, how? How? Because if one of you is a full-time real estate investor and the other works, then all the depreciation, all the tax write-offs can be offset by, can go towards the other person's income. Talk to Karla about all that. There's rules, lots of rules, but it's incredible how you can, if you wanted to have have one person stay home with kids or whatever, you could potentially save so much money by having that person not work and get all the tax benefits. Because if you're both working, you don't get as many tax benefits. So again, talk to Karla. But we had so many people say, "Oh my gosh, we just want my wife or my husband to stay home with the kids," and they're able to do it once they find out that if one person is managing the portfolio, they get all the benefits. Of course, yeah, the value is increasing over time. So while someone else is paying off your debt for you, your value is generally going up. And then you can pass it on to your kids. Another incredible tax thing. This is crazy. You never want to give your kids property while you're alive because they have to pay for it. But when you die, it steps up. It's the craziest tax benefit. It's amazing that when you die, that property steps up to the value of the property that day, and the taxes are wiped out for your kids. If you want your kids to have an inheritance, you got 5 kids, buy 5 houses, give each of them one. That's how they're going to do it. It's amazing. I told my mom that, but they didn't do that for me. Oh well. Asset protection, another thing. It's like, a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, there might be a recession coming. I think I want to get gold. I want to get silver. I feel safer there." It's like, okay, first of all, it doesn't cash flow. It gets taxed high. It doesn't really make you any money, and you can't protect it. Well, maybe you can, but in real estate, you can own property without anyone knowing that you own it. And even if you do have to get the loan in your name, so it's on the chain of title, you can put it in the LLC and get asset protection there. And you get insurance on it. Make sure you've got the right insurance. People are so afraid that, this is one of my hot tips today. People always say, "Well, what's the new Texas?" Because Texas properties values have gone up so much, it doesn't really make sense like it did. But the fastest growing place in America today is the area between Orlando and Tampa. So people are like, "Oh, no way, not with all those hurricanes, I'm not doing that." But what we don't realize when we're on this coast is that hurricanes can be covered by insurance. If you're not in a flood zone and if you're not waterfront, that insurance is really not even that bad. So there's parts of Orlando in that area back there. Orlando's inland, it rarely gets affected, just a bunch of rain during the hurricanes. But you have fairly low property taxes and fairly low insurance rates. And it's the fastest growing part of America. Do you know why? Jobs, but what are the demographics today? Older. Baby boomers, there are 10,000 people turning 65 every day. 10,000 every day. And what are they doing? What Karla said. She's like, "I'm getting out of here. I'm out of here. I'm going to go where I can sell my house here, buy a really nice, much nicer house for a quarter of what I sold, this house for, take all the rest of the money, tax-free, So when you sell your house, you get, and you're married, you get $500,000 gain tax-free
For two,
if you're married.
for two.
Yeah. So if you're not, $250,000, still good. You can take all that money tax-free, sell your house, buy a much cheaper house. Now you have a retirement. So that's what people are doing. And they're moving to a nice beach area that's warm. Happens to have tornadoes, hurricanes. But if you're somewhat inland, you're not as affected. There's lots of rain. And so if you do that, stay out of flood zones. Just stay out of flood zones. Because if you're in a flood zone anywhere, insurance is much higher. Same with Houston. People are afraid of going to Houston. Houston's a great place to invest. Just stay out of the flood zones. All right. And cash flow, obviously. So these are the things you get from buy and hold, which is why I'm crazy about it. I think it is the best way to build wealth. Cash flow, tax benefits, asset protection, values increase over time, at least historically, and generational wealth and leverage. So I'm going to really quickly, let's see what time it is. All right. I'm going to just kind of compare a few things, so I think this helps. You're probably already sold, but those of you who already own, it's just preaching to the choir, which, we go to church to hear the same thing, but always makes you feel good afterwards. But also for those new to it, this is why, to me, real estate outperforms anything if you do it right. Let's say Joe uses $100,000 to buy gold. So what's this basically going to represent is any kind of asset that you buy that doesn't cash flow, but is kind of a hedge against a recession, basically. That's why people buy it. Let's say $100,000. Joe feels good. Mary takes that $100,000 and she buys stocks on margin, 50%. So she's got now $200,000 worth of stocks. She's feeling smarter than Joe. And then Pat takes his $100,000 and buys 4 properties because he could put 20% down. Let's just say they're $100,000 properties. You could get nice properties, not here, but in other places. If you can get over the hurdle of buying somewhere else and doing the research and having a property management team, having your team in place to manage that, you could buy 4 properties. Now Pat has $400,000 in value because he bought 4 properties. Ooh, that is so small. What that says is he gets even more bonuses. Pat can be a male or female. That's why I use Pat. So Pat rents the property. So now, in addition, there's cash flow, and let's see. At 15, he does puts all the cash flow towards paying the loan. He can pay it off in 15 years or less. So I'm sorry that just really came out so hard to read. But the point is that Pat also, when you take the cash flow and the tax savings and the appreciation, the equity is much, much higher. I do not have the slide for that to show you. I am so sorry. I've got it on my website. The comparison is unbelievable. Maybe it's on the next slide. Okay, so deductions, mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, professional fees, education and travel. Talk to Karla. Make sure I'm not lying about this. But the deductions, people often say, I gotta buy a property, I gotta buy a house, I need the tax deductions. It's not, if you're buying your primary residence, sure you get some, but you get so much more if you buy investment property. It's incredible. Depreciation, Pat can write off the house as if they're worth nothing in 27 and a half years, which means you take 80% of the value of the structure, or whatever that you take the structure minus the land, and you get your deduction. So on a $100,000 property, that's about another $3,000 a year in deduction, which adds up over the years. So the difference, again, I'm missing that last slide. It's on my website. The difference is big. Pat makes it's like $1 million or something, and the rest are just maybe $200,000 on the gold and about $400,000 on the stocks. But with all those benefits, Pat gets up to about $1 million. So that's my story that fell flat there. But I promise it's on the website, and I'll make sure Karla gets that to you. I'll send the link to it. All right. So trump your taxes, whether you love them or you hate them. You probably remember this in the date. She's like, he paid 0 taxes, and he says, well, that makes me smart. A lot of people hated him for that comment, but a lot of people hate paying taxes too. It's frustrating to pay taxes when you have no control where that money's going, isn't it? It's like somebody said earlier, I'd rather just pay into the things that I want to pay into and not have someone else just put it into something that I wouldn't agree on. All right, asset protection. We could talk about that later, but you know, you can put your property in an LLC. If you're worried about your asset, you're worried about lawsuits, you put your properties in an LLC and you have insurance on them. You have a liability insurance. Like if you get $500,000 liability insurance, it's really not that expensive, and that's generally what a lawsuit's going to cost you if a tenant gets bit by a dog or slips and falls or something. It's going to be around that $300,000 to $500,000 penalty, and the insurance, if you've got $500,000 liability insurance, you're covered. And this is just to kind of show the price appreciation of real estate over the years, even with the Great Recession. Look at that, it just keeps going up, and that's mainly due to inflation. And inflation hasn't stopped, and it probably won't. All right, so then the question always comes back, I know, like, is now the time to buy? Should I wait until there's a recession so I can buy when stuff is cheaper, right? Anybody think that? Yes. Maybe I should just wait, or am I buying at the peak? Am I going to make the same mistake I made before 10 years ago and buy at the peak, hand it back to the bank? I don't want to do that. So this is the multi-million-dollar question. This is the question I get asked on a lot on the news, and there's the slide. Back in 2003, I believe, no, 2013, I was asked to debate Robert Shiller on Fox News. Robert Shiller, he's the Case-Shiller Index guy. Like, he's a big deal. He won the Pulitzer, I don't know, economic prize. He's a big deal. So I'm like, I don't know. I'm from San Francisco State. He's from Yale. How am I supposed to do that? He's like, really smart. I'm just like a real estate person. But I did it. And at the time, it was 2013. Do you know what home prices were in 2013? So low. Look at this. This is the median home price in the U.S. This is Texas, just to kind of show you where we were at. And California was up here. No joke. It was like 500. So when I told that lady in Stockton to sell, she sold up here and she bought in Texas here. So that's why she made so much money. But it was in 2013 that I got asked to be on Fox, and the debate was, Robert Shiller said, oh, it's a very dangerous time to buy real estate. I'm like, what? I think it's never been a better time. Prices are 25% what they were. Rates are low. You can lock in a payment that's a fourth of rent. Why would you say that? He's like, well, the data. And that's because so often the data is looking at this. So if you were here, you'd be like, oh, the data shows the prices keep going up. But what you're not seeing is what's next. And if you're here, you're saying, oh, the data shows the prices keep going down. Well, because you're not seeing what's coming. So here, this top guy, Case-Shiller Housing Index, is saying it's a bad time to buy. By the end of the interview, he agreed with me. He said, you're probably right. It's probably a good time to buy. Because the fundamentals, it was so cheap. It was so much cheaper to buy a house than rent it. It just made sense. So where are we today? That is the big question. So here's the key, like, prices for sure have gone up. It's scary. Prices have gone up and it feels like we're buying at the top. And in some markets we are. But what the big factor is that's different today is the undersupply of housing. So oversupply is here, undersupply. So we don't have enough houses, enough affordable housing in the U.S. because builders got wiped out in the recession. They could not build. They couldn't get construction loans. They just went bankrupt, so many of them. And house building came to a complete stop for about 6 years. But the population of the U.S. grew by 20 million, over 20 million. And we have all these millennials, the largest generation today, that's just getting out of college and starting their own home, moving out of mom and dad's. So household formations are way up, but the number of houses online, it's not keeping up. So we have this rare moment where people are working, the economy is good, wages have gone up, but the housing is not there, and the interest rates just went down. So right now, believe it or not, it is, if you're waiting for that next recession, for that next foreclosure crisis where you can get great deals, it's just my opinion that we're not going to see that this time around. If we see a recession, it's probably going to be in stocks and certain overpriced properties. You can't just put a dump of a property on the market and put a for sale sign and charge, twice what it's worth and get a buyer like you could have a few years ago. No, you can't do that today. So only good properties can go online, but there's just not enough affordable. So if you stay in that affordable range, there is going to be demand for that for the next decade. There are so many millennials coming online that are looking for housing, and they've got pretty good salaries, and there's nothing out there. That's driving rents up and driving home prices up. Now, we saw a slowdown for sure in the higher end. When interest rates went up, slowdown in higher end, but the affordable housing prices have continued to climb. So that's the opportunity, in my opinion, today. I have a lot more slides online about why I think that. Again, this is supply and demand. In the high end, more supply than sales. In the low end, it's just, there isn't enough. And that's really the crisis that we're having today. It's an affordable housing crisis.
What area is that?
That was, I think, just nationally. But, there's no such thing as a national housing market. Every little neighborhood is different. They just kind of show on average what's happening. So you just got to be really careful. There are definitely markets to be careful of. LA, Seattle, New York, San Francisco, there's an oversupply of condos, high-end condos. Those are not selling. There's just not, the Chinese buyers have pulled out. The stuff that they like to buy, which was higher end, it's moving more slowly. So if you're trying to flip high-end properties, just be really careful with that. But if you're trying to provide affordable housing, it will sell before you can even, put it on the market. And then, of course, mortgage rates down. I have more economic, webinars. I do these little videos, and they're on our website that kind of talk about what's happening with the economy. But really, the most important thing you want to be paying attention to is when the Fed raises rates or lowers rates. When they raise rates, it's the intention is to slow down the economy. And last year, they raised rates 4 times, I think, and everything came to a halt intentionally to slow down bubbles. Well, President Trump doesn't want to slow down on his dime, not when he's trying to campaign to be president. So he's like, no, he wants those rates down. So there's been a battle. That's the headline news. The president fighting the Federal Reserve. They're supposed to be independent of each other. The Fed only raises rates to slow down an economy, only lowers rates to stimulate it. If we were in a recession, you would lower rates to get things going. Well, that's what President Trump wants them to do to stimulate the economy so he can get reelected, is basically it. So pay attention to that. Rates, for the first time, went down last month. The Fed rate, not mortgage rates, Fed rate, and that means we're headed, that's a stimulus. That means that it's a stimulus to the market, so we'll probably see things boom in for a few more months, probably the next year during this election time. In the long run, that's going to change, and there is most likely a recession in, the next 2 years, sometime in there. Again, not so much in housing. If you're looking and waiting for your foreclosure, you might be waiting a while. Okay, so questions? Yes?
That $250,000 tax-free you get when you sell a house, is that still applying to the housing LLC, or is that your primary?
Your primary residence, yeah. Oh, but if you have to have lived in it, is it still true? 2 out of the last 5 years?
2 out of the last 5 years.
So if you lived in it for 2 years, rented it for 3, you'd still get that benefit. So what some people do is they'll live in a house for 2 years, rent it for 3, go live in another house for 2 years, rent it for 3, and then just keep taking advantage of that. Like, you can do it more than once, right?
Yes, there's no limit on how long you can do it, how often you can do it, every 2 out of 5 years, and that's a strategy that people are using to purchase more property.
Even if you put it
But
in an LLC?
doesn't-
If it's in an LLC, but you lived in it for 2 of the last 5, I
Yeah.
think you're okay, right? Yes.
But doesn't it have to be of equal or lesser value?
That's a 1031 exchange.
Right.
So if you have a rental property,
No, on the 250, you can do
Does
that
it?
at higher
No, it does.
value.
It does not have to be equal or lesser value on a primary residence. So the primary residency law under Code 121 is different than 1031. 1031 is equal or greater value but not a primary resident doesn't need to be equal or greater value. Just looking at the gain on that individual property that you're selling.
So then when you live 3 years and rented 2 or vice versa, that now is primary residence, or is that considered an investment?
If it was a primary residence, if you lived in it and claimed it as a primary residence for 2 out of the last 3 years. Even if you rent it for the last 3 and it was your primary, it's going to go as a primary.
But don't cheat on it. You have
Yeah.
to actually live.
Yeah, no tricks.
Okay.
Can you do a 1031 from an investment property to a primary residence?
No. It has to be like for like, investment for investment. Now, there are times when people 1031 to an investment property and something happens and they're able to convert it back to a primary. There are rules around that and laws, but that's very iffy. So my point to you is, if you do a 1031 exchange, right, and that property that you were purchasing, it was supposed to be a rental property, but something happened and you had to convert it back to a primary, you could get around the 1031 rules. There have been exceptions to that. But as a rule of thumb, your initial intent in all the contracts need to say it's going from like to like property.
So it can be a home from units to a home, but you have to buy it as the home as an investment property.
That's correct, like for like.
And hold it as a rental for a little while.
Mm-hmm. I would say at least a year and a day.
Suppose your income property is also your residence. When you change over, what do you have to do for the break?
We're going to split. If your income property was also your residence, so you lived in the residence and you had income property associated with it, then we're going to split off. Part of it's going to be investment, part of it's going to be primary.
Whichever percentage you used.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, the most, her question was, other than Florida or Texas, where do you recommend outside of California? I really do what I said earlier, was let's look at where the population is going, where the job growth is going, and where cities are reinventing themselves and investing billions of dollars in their growth. And so some of the shockingly awesome place, and only in the last 3 years, is Detroit, because they've invested about $4 billion in renovating, but you can still buy a house for $50,000, $60,000 in an area that's in the path of progress. It's a little riskier, but we're literally buying A-class properties under $100,000 in Detroit. We're seeing so much reinvestment in the city. Same with Cleveland; it's becoming a healthcare hub. Atlanta is now, if you want to know where a bunch of Hollywood business is going, it's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Atlanta. And I mean, there's just, so you got to watch where the jobs are going. Employers are sick of California. Watch where they're going. As wherever they're going, you want to, if that area is also reinventing itself and investing in itself, it's exciting to me. So Detroit, Cleveland, Atlanta, Birmingham is close to Atlanta and cheaper. And there's a lot of growth. Huntsville, Alabama is where a lot of military is. Jacksonville, Florida. I still love Houston.
Do you think 3 hours away by plane?
I mean, all of those places are about 3. I mean, well, Houston's about 3. I believe it or not, I kind of like Chico, California. I hate California rental laws, but you lost 11,000 homes to the Camp Fire. And there is a desperate demand. My daughter owned a house there. I talked her into buying a house instead of a car. So she bought a house. She did the 3% down. Her mortgages, everything in is about $1,400. She decided to rent her house out because there was, families lost everything. She's getting $3,500 a month. So it's kind of an interesting time to and that's not 3 hours, but that's 10 hours by car. But so. In California, I mean, I hear the Inland Empire, you can still get deals. Fresno and Bakersfield haven't really recovered. Stockton hasn't totally recovered, but you're still kind of going into those inland areas that are a little more vulnerable during a recession. So, but that's where you could still potentially cash flow.
What about Nevada?
Nevada is great. It's just, Reno is booming. There are so many, we're building homes. We can't cash flow that well in Reno, but we syndicate and we are building subdivisions in Reno, and we cannot keep up with demand because Tesla's there and Amazon, and it's just that the median home price is like 400, so you're still going to have a little challenge in